1954, St. Louis. That evening, a call came into the police station. A frightened citizen reported that while fishing, he had pulled a drowned man out of the river. The police began to question him. Was it another fisherman? The man confused them entirely, replying, "No, it was a woman in a dress, and there were railroad spikes with her." An investigative team rushed to the scene. On the way, the officers speculated whether a disabled woman had drowned, but the reality was different. It was a very young girl, 18 years old at most. How did she end up in the water? It wasn't swimming season. Did she slip and fall? No. The detectives noticed a ligature mark on the girl's neck. This was no accident, but a murder. The girl had been strangled. The spikes were attached to her right leg. A spike is a heavy iron pin used to fasten sleepers to rails on a railroad. The killer used them as weights, hoping the body would never surface. He failed to consider one thing: fishermen often set nets here. The murder occurred several days ago. Rain had washed away all tracks, and fishermen had trampled the rest. At the time, no one knew this was only the first victim of a killer who considered himself a genius. The murdered girl was quickly identified. She was Gail Starrett, an economics student. A few days prior, she had left for a university seminar and never returned. She had vanished. Her parents immediately notified the police and searched for their daughter themselves. What if she was alive but had simply gone somewhere? Her mother spent hours looking out the window, flinching at every sound from the porch. Could her daughter have returned? But there was no miracle.
Gail was found in a river. Some villain had killed her. Detectives tried to understand who had attacked the girl. Perhaps a street mugger? But that theory was quickly dismissed. Railroad spikes were tied to the body. There were no railroads in the immediate vicinity, meaning the perpetrator had brought the weights with him. He planned to kill Gail and cover his tracks. A theory emerged. The student was killed by someone she knew. Friends were questioned, and they shared her story. Up until her disappearance, Gail had been happy. She stood out among her classmates, modest, bright, and active. Many guys had their eyes on her, but only one could win her over. His name was Gene Lashley. He approached her, dropped to one knee, and proposed, "Will you marry me?" Gail thought it was a joke, but the persistent suitor intercepted her again the next day. And again he dropped to one knee like a knight before a fair lady. "I ask for your hand and heart." The girl's heart softened. That is how they began dating. Gene Lashley studied at the St. Louis Law College. He was a smart, well-read young man. Gail quickly realized she adored him. She loved him and told her close friends that they might get married. She called him a genius. And now the girl was murdered, and Gene became the prime suspect. Detectives found the young man. He wasn't at home, but at Gail's parents' house, trying to comfort them in their terrible grief. "This beast will surely be found," he told them. Gail's mother said Gene was like a son to them now. He had searched for Gail alongside them. He cried when her remains were found, and now he was helping and looking after them, becoming close and dear. But detectives still had to check his alibi. Where were you that day? At the university, then at the library. They verified the young man's words and became suspicious. Dreiser's an American tragedy. In our story, it also played a role. Detectives pulled the university library records and found that Gene Lashley had indeed been in the reading room, and he had checked out an American tragedy. But that wasn't all. The forensic results for Gail Starrett's body arrived. It was a shock. She was pregnant, over 2.5 months along. The detective had also read Dreiser. Gail's death reminded him of the plot of an American tragedy. In that novel, a young man drowns his girlfriend after she informs him of her pregnancy because he doesn't want to marry her. What if the novel's plot gave Gene the idea for the murder? Detectives began investigating Gene Lashley closely. The student made excuses. Yes, he liked Gail very much, but they had never been intimate. He claimed they had no serious relationship, only a friendship and simple kissing. Was he lying or not? Detectives worked with Gene's acquaintances.
Soon, one of them revealed he was the only one who knew about their relationship. 3 months before the murder. That day, Gene visited his beloved. The setting was intimate. Gail was in a light robe, and the young man couldn't restrain himself. He pushed himself on her, trying to undress her, but met fierce resistance. Gail screamed and demanded that Gene leave. Gene was caught off guard, but quickly regained his composure, put on an act, and began to beg for forgiveness. Gail loved him, so she didn't stay angry long and forgave the outburst. They laughed it off. According to the friend, Gene never managed to achieve intimacy with his girlfriend. It turned out Gail was pregnant, but not by Gene Lashley. But by whom? At this stage, the investigation reached a dead end. Lashley disappeared from the police's radar, and the case was archived. No one could have imagined that the killer wasn't just hiding, he had decided to beat the system from the inside. 3 years passed. That evening, Alex Zile, an employee of the Regional Chamber of Commerce, was very nervous. He couldn't believe he was going to kill today, but it was too late to back down. He entered his accomplice's apartment. A prepared knife was already on the table. Zile began to tremble. Until the last moment, he hoped it was just a prank. Then he became hysterical. He began to speak loudly, saying he might ruin everything, and asked for permission to stay behind and wait. The leader fell silent. Zile thought he was about to be killed. But the leader suddenly said calmly, "Fine, wait here." Zale paced the room. He didn't even have the courage to run away. After a while, the leader returned, calm, satisfied, and covered in blood. As soon as he walked in, he said, "The job is done." He produced the loot, Colt's pistols. He asked to hide them in a safe place. Zale rushed to follow the order. While he busied himself, the killer fell asleep. Zale curled up next to him like a loyal dog. Meanwhile, state detectives were racing to Franklin County. A call had come in, a double homicide. At the local sheriff's office, Sergeant John Taylor and his assistant, Officer Peter Mix, had been killed. Sergeant Taylor was found in the precinct yard, his chest riddled with knife wounds and a gunshot. The medical examiner stated that the knife wounds were not life-threatening. Death resulted from the gunshot. Assistant Mix died in the station hallway. A steak knife was in his hand. Had the officers argued and killed each other? But experts figured out where the knife came from. It was in Mix's hand because he had pulled the knife from Taylor's back before he died. It was an act of unheard-of audacity, killing police officers right inside the station. But for what? The murder of law enforcement officers is always an extraordinary event, so leadership from the state police arrived, ostensibly to take charge. In reality, they were more of a hindrance. They ordered that nothing be touched without permission, and that all actions be cleared with the brass.
And here was the motive: an open weapons safe, 5 pistols and 64 rounds of ammunition. So the officers were killed for the weapons. 5 Colts were missing. Surely an entire gang was at work. No one suspected the killer was alone. There were no tracks. Unfortunately, the initial examination was superficial. Fingerprints were sought on the knife and the door handle, but the killer had wiped everything clean. They didn't think to check the chessboard. That was where the killer's traces remained, because he felt right at home there. A canine handler arrived with a dog, and then something strange happened. As the service dog studied the tracks at the crime scene, it led the handler to a young, ambitious, and promising detective named Arthur Stern. Arthur Stern was known for his love of chess and often repeated that crime was an intellectual duel. He smiled calmly, as if everything happening was an engaging game to him, and said, "I have a ham sandwich in my pocket. That's what the dog smelled." But the dog ignored the sandwich. It simply stood next to him. The police officers thought the dog hadn't eaten enough before the call and was just begging for food. No one noticed that on Stern's desk, among the case files, lay a volume of American classics. The investigation began, but the killer was certain he wouldn't be caught because he was brilliant. While detectives were examining the scene, their work was interrupted by loud shouts demanding a cell be opened. They came from the holding area where a drunk woman was being kept. The police tried to ignore her, but the woman said she heard shots, looked out the window, and saw a man running. He climbed over the fence and then disappeared around the corner of the neighboring house. Interestingly, that house belonged to Captain Sharp, the local police chief. This was a crucial detail. Either the killer was not from around here and didn't know where the police lived, or he was incredibly arrogant and sure he wouldn't be caught. Detectives didn't rule out that the criminal might attack other law enforcement officers. Duty officers were instructed to watch everyone entering the station. They began carefully checking all former inmates. No one knew that at this time the killer was planting a false trail for the investigation. That day, the killer enlisted his brother's help. He gave him the task of cutting letters out of a newspaper and pasting them onto a clean sheet of paper. He wrote the text himself and was very pleased with it. It read, "Soon you will die, wait." While the brother fiddled with the letters, the killer shared his grand plans. He already had 5 pistols and some ammunition. He just needed to get more bullets, and then they could rob a bank. "We will be rich." His goal was a bank robbery, after which he wanted to flee the country. Occasionally, he repeated the phrase, "Heavy iron can hide any secret at the bottom of a river." His brother was bewildered and asked, "What if I refuse?" He received a cold reply, "I'll have to kill you." "You could kill me? Could you kill our mother?" The answer was even more terrifying, "I'll kill mother too." That answer sent shivers down the brother's spine. A few days later, Detective Stern discovered an anonymous note in the belongings of the deceased Sergeant Taylor, which said, "Soon you will die, wait." A theory arose that someone had long held a grudge against the sergeant. Detective Stern began to track the suspect, and soon everything pointed to one man, Matt Smith. Matt Smith was 25. He worked at a factory in St. Louis. On weekends, he would come to his hometown, cause trouble, drink, and occasionally end up in a cell. The late Sergeant Taylor had long forgiven his countrymen's drunken antics, not filing reports and instead trying to shame him, appealing to his conscience. But the following weekend, it would happen again, and the sergeant's patience finally snapped. He filed a report and sent a letter to the factory. As a result, the troublemaker was denied his bonus. Detective Stern interrogated Smith. He showed him the anonymous note and asked, "Did you do this?" Matt Smith shook his head, replying that he was seeing the note for the first time. Investigators checked his alibi. During the hour the police were killed, Smith was supposed to be at work, but he was absent from his station at that exact time. Stern reported this to his superiors. "It's definitely him, there's no one else." Smith was detained. He tried to explain, but no one believed him anymore. At that moment, a school teacher from St. Louis arrived in town, the modest and refined Olivia Andrews. "I've come for my husband. He's here with you." She placed a marriage certificate on the table. He hadn't killed anyone. It turned out that on the day of the murder, Smith had a wedding. The hoodlum and the teacher had married in secret, so her principal wouldn't find out. Smith had an ironclad alibi. They had to let him go. Meanwhile, the brilliant criminal was also planning to get married. In the city of Springfield, Lucy Greenhall wanted to get married and was trying hard. She sewed herself a full skirt and wore it proudly. One day, a miracle happened. Lucy was walking to her job at the bank when suddenly he appeared before her, introduced himself as Jean, and stunned her. "Will you marry me?" Lucy almost blurted out, "You bet, such a handsome guy." The sudden romance moved with incredible speed. Her fiancé took her to the movies and dancing every day. He was interested in everything about Lucy, especially her work. Lucy worked at the bank and counted money every day. It wasn't a very exciting job, but Jean suddenly began questioning her about everything.
Lucy was surprised by her fiancé's curiosity and asked, "Why do you need to know?" Jean replied, "I want to rob it." Lucy smiled. "What a joker you are." She gave him a lot of information, where the keys were, who held them, which rooms they opened, and what was stored where. Lucy was certain her fiancé was joking, but a few days later, he suddenly showed her a pistol. "We're going to rob your bank." The girl was stunned. In an almost commanding tone, Jean said, "You must get the keys to the safe." Lucy replied, "I can't." Her fiancé informed her, "You'll have to, or I'll kill you because you know too much." There was a smile on his lips, but ice in his eyes. Lucy's heart sank, and she agreed. But the ordinary bank worker proved to have more courage and determination than the men. Lucy devised a plan. She told her uncle, who arrived very quickly and helped her quit the bank. On the day she resigned, Lucy left a letter on her desk that said, "Our bank is going to be robbed on Monday. The criminal has pistols." She hoped she was safe, as she was leaving with her uncle to Alabama, and no one would know. Lucy didn't realize her criminal fiancé had a devilish talent. He caught up with Lucy and her uncle at a hotel in Mobile. He entered her room saying, "What about our deal?" He pulled out a pistol, and Lucy realized she was about to die. Lucy was lucky. Her criminal fiancé didn't kill her. He simply forced her to write a new letter. Lucy wrote, "I shamelessly slandered my fiancé because I thought he had stopped loving me and decided to take revenge. Please consider my report a lie." Then he disappeared, and Lucy and her uncle breathed a sigh of relief. Jean went off to prepare for his next great crime. He didn't know he wouldn't be free much longer. He had frightened too many people, and people were tired of being afraid. Soon, Vern Lashley appeared at the Criminal Investigation Department and revealed his brother Gene had killed 2 police officers in Franklin and his girlfriend Gail in St. Louis 3 years ago. And then he had changed his last name, becoming Arthur Stern, and was working as a detective. Detective Stern and the student Lashley were the same person. It turned out that all this time, the criminal had been leading a double life, killing and then investigating his own crimes. Detectives had been working themselves to exhaustion, checking the alibis of career criminals, while the killer in uniform watched them from the sidelines. But he made the same mistake as the heroes of his favorite books. He trusted too much in those who knew his secret. Stern had to be detained immediately. But how to approach a calculating killer? Only through trickery. He was invited in under the pretext of being paid money that the accounting department owed him for overtime. When Stern appeared, he was immediately seized by police officers. After his arrest, Stern did not resist. He understood there was too much evidence against him. His brother also turned over a secret suitcase to the investigation. It was hidden in the attic of a school, and inside were 5 Colt pistols, all with the killer's fingerprints. He had forgotten to wipe them, a fatal mistake. Stern had no choice but to confess everything. He described how he tried to frame an innocent man for the murder of the police officers. However, the investigation had also made several mistakes. No one thought to take fingerprints from the chessboard. Yet 5 minutes before the murder, the criminal had been playing chess with his victim. The second major oversight was not believing the service dog. Detectives were shocked. Why did he kill? After all, he had proposed marriage. It turned out Arthur Stern never intended to marry. It was a clever move to make the girl fall for him. And Gail fell hopelessly in love, calling him a genius. But time passed, and she reminded him of the wedding and told him she was pregnant. The burden of a wife and child was not part of the genius's plans. He intended to rob a bank and move to another country, so he decided to take 2 lives, the girl who loved him and his unborn child. The killer believed he was a genius and would never be caught, But there is no such thing as a perfect crime. They teach that in law college, too. To kill a woman who loves you and is carrying your child, to kill a colleague with whom you were joking and playing chess 5 minutes earlier, such things are the work not of a genius, but of a loathsome monster. Stern believed until the end that he would escape punishment, even writing a letter to the state governor asking to be sent abroad as a special agent. Whether he was naive or arrogant doesn't matter. The killer was executed. Zile, the Chamber of Commerce employee, received a 10-year suspended sentence, while Stern's brother, who turned him in, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for his long silence and for helping hide the pistols. As for the St. Louis police, they had new complex cases, tangled crimes, and clever villains who thought themselves geniuses, but still ended up behind bars. But those are entirely different stories. Dear friends, thank you for your attention. In the next episode of our Crime Chronicles, we will tell you about a maniac who robbed and raped young women. We will also tell you about a girl who was harassed by her stepfather for a long time, then betrayed by her mother, and who, hoping to build a better future, got married, only to discover that her nightmare was far from over. Subscribe to our channel so you don't lose us. See you soon.